Hi, I'm James Brookes, and welcome to From the Factory Floor, a conversational podcast about all things startup and tech, brought to you by the folks at tsf.tech. Right, so welcome to week number 7 of From the Factory Floor. This week, I'm very kindly joined again by the dream team of Aleksa and Eric. Hello, chaps.
Hello, James.
Hello, James.
The sunny climes of the Manchester office. Actually quite sunny for a October day, although I don't know how cold it is. But so last week we discussed all things tech architecture and sort of at a really high level on the basis that as we said last week, we were going to dive into some of the topics a little bit deeper, beginning with this week where we're going to talk all about the cloud and not the ones that are in above Manchester at the moment. So really, I want to open this up because obviously you guys have got a vast experience in tech, both during and pre-cloud. So I don't know if you call that sunny or not. So, I mean, I just open it up to both of you really from the outset of what is the cloud? What is this thing that everyone seems to go on about these days?
Yeah, that's. I mean, cloud has been now with us for a while. It's kind of entered the vocabulary as something that everybody knows, and I don't maybe even remember what it looked before the cloud. So for anyone long enough in the industry, they can remember planning for software projects, but not only for the architectural build phase, but also the operational phase, the procurement of servers, where will things run, how will they scale, what sort of skills are needed from the operational and database administration perspective. And then all of a sudden, we have all those things as services at our fingertips. So provisioning infrastructure and a lot of things related to infrastructure at the click of a button without that requirements for managing it. That's in essence is what the cloud computing.
So it's really just outsourcing, isn't it? We've outsourced all the bits of the software that aren't the interesting bits, really.
Yes, all the software engineers don't want to do or think about it.
So my interpretation was always like obviously pre-cloud, it was huge racks of servers in the basement and some golem-looking creature trying to keep them all running. Now we'll go into talking about some of the different services, but everyone talks about AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Engine. So in your experience, what was it like before cloud? Just obviously isn't it more a point of interest than anything, without alluding to anyone's age.
Well, yeah, alluded to my age.
The more experienced among us.
I was a software engineer at the time, so I was writing code, and would SSH into a server and write it. But I generally didn't do There was another team, right? You had your infrastructure team, and they dealt with that stuff. But as a startup company, you would have to have your kind of one-man-fits-all infrastructure team and developer. But now you can have just your developer and the infrastructure is elsewhere. So.
Yes, yeah. So there's no more, build your software and throw it over the fence to someone else to worry about it. You can actually take that holistic view of the software. But I think what did sort of drive the change is when these sort of challenges that software developers, engineers probably discovered quite early were obvious to the business as well. In order to run reasonably sized project or piece of software, you needed substantial potentially capital cost to get your service provision or wherever in your data center and have all the software installed and then set them up. But also then have enough skills to manage that, which is completely outside of what you're actually doing as a software engineering activity. Then thinking about things like scaling, that becomes a very difficult problem with physical things. You have to add more or less and move them around. And I think what we shouldn't also forget is what businesses have been doing in the past as well, is when you think about building software, secure software, security and compliance around software. It all had to be built into that sort of function. With cloud, you can outsource all of that. It's a click of a button, everything is compliant, fast, scalable, you can just start using it.
So how much of an overhead security is, especially when you look at fintech and you look at some of the requirements and the documents you need to fill out. It's obviously much easier to say, here's with AWS and with Google Cloud, here's all the certifications they have to prove that you are at least storing anything securely within obviously their data centers. So obviously for you guys, what have you found been the biggest impact of the cloud? Is it the efficiency or is it the security, or what's the biggest impact day to day on the average developer?
Efficiency, certainly, but I think there's an underlying theme in the tech chapters of our book and from this cloud stuff is that these kind of the first order kind of impacts of stuff are significant, but actually things go a lot further. So it's not just that it's now more efficient. The fact that it's more efficient, the fact that it's easy and remote means that I work in a completely different way to what we were used to. So I can now release multiple times a day because I don't have to carry hard disks to a server room, or I can, duplicate the setup somewhere else and run something different very easily. And it just completely changes the way that you work. So I think it's all that kind of downstream, second, third order impacts that are the main benefit.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So it's not about how it impacts how we used to work. It's how it impacted us to work in a different way and what we can do. And especially in the startup world, where you want to really get out there quickly, be able to own the whole process of not only building but releasing and managing your applications, and then think about scaling at that level. Maybe 15, 20 years ago, that would be very hard or expensive to do. But that cloud allows us to think in that way, basically build all of that into our software. So instead of having something over the fence, which is operational, we just brought everything together into one unified sort of platform, really.
I mean, you kind of mentioned something there, which especially in sort of our world and startups and looking at running a startup and managing things in the cloud, you mentioned the word cost, which is always a hot topic of conversation in terms of how do you keep costs down. Is cost one of the big considerations you make when you're looking at what to use cloud? So I always think of the old days of being very expensive to run and especially scale as well, because you've got a maximum capacity. And oftentimes if you're not at that max capacity, you've just got things just sat there. Is there anything else except for cost that you consider when you're thinking about sort of what sort of provider to go to for cloud? Because we've mentioned enough of them already.
To be honest, I don't think we really consider cost that much. Using cloud is cheaper than not using cloud, and therefore we don't worry about it. I guess that, and which cloud provider versus another one, there are cost differences, but they're not. Again, it's the actual financial cost in terms of the invoice from the cloud provider is one thing. The cost involved in the effort of using it is another thing. So in that respect, we'll generally pick the simpler setup or the cloud provider that's, one click away. So, when Heroku shot up in the world and became a cool thing, you didn't need anything. You just pushed your code and it was there. It was brilliant. So we used that. AWS has lots and lots of features in it, but learning how to use them and configure them makes it a bit harder to do.
Yeah, I think about cost as a sort of a main driver. I think is a fallacy of thinking in terms of cloud computing. I think what Eric said there is absolutely spot on. It's the simplicity, really. What cloud allows you is to start very simple, but you have to think simple as well. In those terms, make sure that your product is an architecture is simple enough to go into the cloud in that way. And then you can start small. So that's a big difference now. So you don't need a big server straight away. You can start small and pay much less to begin with. But if you're looking to compare in cost, absolute cost of ownership of running something heavy in the cloud or in your hardware, I think it will become obvious that it's probably in the long term, in absolute terms, maybe it's more expensive on the cloud, and that shouldn't be the driver. So I've seen examples in the past where there will be a cloud platform designed to handle web scale, so maybe not Google size, but something fairly substantial. In order to support something like that on the cloud, the builds will be quite substantial. And once the stakeholders, business owners realize that they would be questioning, well, why am I going into the cloud if I'm paying more than I would for my hardware actually. But that's not really the point. The point is you can start small and simple with a relatively low initial outlay, but then grow as you need. Because I think what to me makes a lot of sense is even if it does cost more, if you can easily scale and recover that cost from the services you sell or value you bring with your software, that definitely still makes sense.
But you wouldn't advocate, would you, starting smaller than when you get to a certain size, pulling it off into hardware?
No, definitely not. So I think that would be, I mean, the thing is, would you do it? I mean, would you be planning for, like running something for 30 years and then you need, because owning your data center had additional cost on it that we don't think about. I certainly haven't as a software engineer in the past, but that adds even an additional layer of complexity. So yeah, I think it will definitely be, as long as there is a value you bring with that scalability and obviously the growth in cost. I mean, cloud is still there as a main driver.
So obviously it's, it's the old kind of production line setup, isn't it? You get your specialists to specialize, and your cloud provider, data center providers do that for you. They take and save all those costs, but also add in the kind of expertise that you would otherwise be missing. So if you did try and build something yourself, it would probably be a bit flaky and probably oversimple. But because these guys are the experts in it, right, you get to benefit from that.
You have to tap into their experience, seeing as they're the ones who are, like I say, the experts. So it's quite interesting with cloud and some of the considerations that you have to go into it. I know we used certain platforms before, but I think the word, obviously, scale is what most people assume associate with cloud. I know it's something that I was as I sort of started doing project management in tech, was taught, and it's really the elasticity was one of the key benefits of when you need it, it can scale to whatever you need it to be because you're not constrained by your physical hardware downstairs. But then when you don't need it, if assuming it's configured in the right way, it can actually then scale back, making sure that it's appropriate for what you use. I guess, especially from our perspective, I know we use every single manner of tools under the sun these days, and it's not just the dev tooling. So things like at TSF, we use Jira. We use Jira Cloud. Slack, we use a cloud-based provider, and that's before we even start getting into the tech tools. How much of an impact has having all these tools being in the cloud and being able to integrate impacted development and how you guys go about actually building these platforms and applications?
So I think it's something we haven't mentioned yet, but it's just speed, isn't it? Like, back in the day when we had a physical, it was a Jenkins server, I presume, but we actually had to set up this Jenkins server and configure it, and then set up a Perforce server or a Git server or what have you, and set them all up. And actually just to start your project, it took a while, and give everyone like SSH keys and all of this jazz. But now it's all of those things just a service that's provided by GitLab or Git themselves or GitHub Brother or whoever. So now you're up and running within a day, no trouble.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, and I think that sort of tells you a bit about the cloud. So cloud started as an infrastructure as a service, really. So getting compute resources on demand. At the beginning, there were like VMs or storage or what you needed, and then it sort of grew into platform as a service. And now you're building everything as a service on the cloud now. So everything really is a service. Everything is at one click. So that sort of speed is been great for the software teams, because you can now be up to speed, up and running with your project, your code in Jira, in GitHub or GitLab, whatever, and your project in Jira, and your continuous integration in Travis or GitLab CI or whatever it is, and your team chat in Slack, and you're up and running in a few hours' time. You can start building your code and shipping it.
We've talked a little bit there about the kind of generations, haven't we? So the old just I've got a server somewhere, I don't know where it is, or I guess most people at home probably think of things like iCloud, but all that is data storage, like Dropbox or what have you, data storage as a service. And then we've got our tooling as a service, so Jira Cloud and stuff like that. And I guess the other thing that's currently well established is database as a service. Mm-hmm. But where it's going next, you've already got offerings which are effectively back end as a service. So and we've got serverless functions which are already pretty well established, but there's going to be definitely a lot more trend in terms of that respect, where the actual entity that we're building doesn't really exist anymore in the same sense that it used to.
Yes, yeah, and what's also interesting, and there is a bit of from the initial sort of a few big cloud providers, each developing their own servicing and fragmentation in the market. There's a bit of initiative to have a bit of a convergence of those services, and potentially that you can now, something that probably you couldn't even think maybe in a few years from now, is move your workloads between clouds. And when you think about database and service, it's about protocols. What sort of database protocols are supported in terms of, SQL or document databases and things like that. And then you can point it to any cloud provider you want. Same goes with other over-the-top services on the cloud, like container orchestration, or I don't know, maybe AI and things like that.
You mentioned containers there. I mean, in our previous lives, I know DevOps was a big thing, and they just started moving into containers. I mean, just for the tech novices among us, what actually is a container? What does that give you guys the ability to do outside of what was available before?
Yeah, I think we touched on this last time, didn't we? We talked about cloud native architectures, designing the system that is for running on the cloud from the get-go. And I think we said containers are a key part of that architecture, making it your software built one and run anywhere, be it on your machine, on server somewhere else, on a cloud, or anywhere else. And I think in terms of this standardization or convergence, we should probably mention services like Docker and Kubernetes in specific.
Before getting to that, I think, container, the clue's in the name, isn't it? It's just a thing that contains your code. So the purpose of it really is that I can do some work and put it in this container, and then I can move it to that cloud provider, this cloud provider, or run it on my laptop. So I'm not creating anything bespoke for one cloud platform. I'm not stuck on that platform and locked in. I can pick it up and run with it anywhere. So that's really what containers are. They're just this kind of wrapper interface that works everywhere.
Yeah. Build once, run everywhere. Yeah, I think I said it before.
I mean, in terms of, so obviously you mentioned containers, and obviously one of the business benefits of that is you can run anywhere, so you do have that flexibility, and obviously the dev team can really influence where things go. I know some people have preferences, whether it's AWS, Cloud Engine, DigitalOcean. However, is there any other sort of really major services? I know obviously the growth of AI and machine learning and that sort of thing. Do you think sort of as a service is kind of where everything is going to go eventually?
Yeah, I think everything is as a service. We're even kind of considering the services that we provide as a service, if that makes sense.
Service.
Yeah, services as a service and what have you. I don't know what the acronym for that is, but
services as a service, SaaS.
Yeah. The thing, I mean, you pulled out the AI thing there. I mean, AI is definitely one thing that benefits significantly from having an as a service kind of platform. So especially if you're doing a common task that lots of other people have done, if you were to try and spin up your own facial recognition thing, you need to set up a server and it has to have loads of data on it to train it and things like that. But all of those kind of things have been done for you and are available as a service. So yeah, facial recognition, just don't think about it, it works.
Yes, you don't have to think about that sort of engineering. How do I build something that will employ my smart algorithms or not, or something like that? You have that already. I think, for example, Google Cloud has their own AI platform, which makes all the common tasks you do much easier. Data ingestion, data cleansing, and then applying the models that you develop. I mean, that becomes a commodity, really. What is the differentiator is the algorithm, is your model, is the things that you actually, as a developer or a data scientist, figure out. And the same for image processing. You can, obviously, there's a lot of open source libraries that you can use for image processing and classification and all the other things you do with images. But if you're looking for, let's say, image classification, there is a service for it. You just use the API, push to the cloud, you get your results back.
And I mean, I know obviously we're sort of trying to keep these time-wise a little bit down. And looking at the time, we're kind of cracking on a little bit now. So, I mean, when it comes to the cloud, sort of what's your expectations? We said sort of service as a service. Do you just see cloud just overtaking everything and everything will be a service? Down to service as a service, I suppose.
In the startup world, I think it already has. That we don't really talk with any startups about, having a server or not having cloud. Obviously, you've got plenty of large organizations out there who are, running on their legacy kit because they're too scared to move or what have you. But not in our world, really. Everything is cloud or IoT, where you've got the edge stuff. Somebody the other day mentioned fog computing, which I'd never heard of before, but that's the next iteration of cloud, where instead of everything being in a data center, because there's hundreds of processing units around your house, it's kind of sort of in the cloud in the sense of you don't really know where it is, but it's everywhere physically as well.
The abstraction applies, but it's not in the cloud. It's basically everywhere. It's like somewhere in between. You can't really see it for the
I was going to say, I mean, whoever comes up with these, whether obviously the cloud or fog or God knows what's next, but I mean, it is interesting sort of how it's impacted the startup world. And like you say, everything is as a service, everything is instantly available, quicker to spin up, and obviously it's enabled us to sort of do what we do on a much better, at least more efficiently, in terms of just spinning up the amount of times, just one-click deployments, spinning things up, just makes, and then from a business perspective, being able to test that and show that quite quickly.
And for a startup, a lot of startups, they're kind of premised on this, Uber is effectively just what happens when you take localized data centers and centralize it into the cloud applied to taxis, right? That's kind of how most startups, are going to succeed. But I guess means there's limited scope for the number of each one.
Yeah.
You've got to just come up with the service that no one's done yet, and that's the important thing.
Yeah. That's what a lot of startups we will try to do as well. But I think for our founders, it is important to get that cloud is a way that they can build their businesses at pace, really, but also iterate quickly and do things in sort of a holistic way. But start simple. That should be a key message as well. I mean, typically what we do, we start very simple. We're using cloud and containers and all the best practices built in, but we try to use a simple Docker Compose setup, for example, on DigitalOcean, because that's the most cost-effective way to start. But we don't tie ourselves into it so we can grow further. So rather than thinking about, how do I web scale to scale of Google, let's think how we can start simple, but allowing us to scale when we need to.
I think, on that note, I think we're pretty much out of time now. So I'll just hand back to like we have done for the last six episodes so far. I've also forgotten how many we've done. So what would be, I'll hand it over to Aleksa first. What would be your main takeaway, one thing you'd want people to learn from this podcast about what is the cloud effectively?
I think, I just probably say it a bit earlier as well, but I think what's important is to understand how cloud can help, really. So cloud is not a silver bullet or something you can just use and become, Uber or Google or whatever you need to be. It is that flexibility that you want to embrace, so you can iterate and build things quickly as you go along.
How about you, Eric?
Again, I think we've already covered it, but I don't think there's really a choice. We're not here trying to sell you cloud as one option out of many. I think we're just really talking about it because it's so prevalent and so important, and it is everywhere. But to me, the outcome of cloud is the fact that we all think differently now. We're not the term cloud native, when used last week, is about the thing you build being built for the cloud. But to be a cloud native person just means you think in terms of the cloud, or you think in the way that people didn't used to think, because you're not constrained by the physical environment. You've got so much more freedom. So we are cloud native.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, chaps. So I think I've got you both again next week. You're putting in a proper shift for this. The factory floor. So we're on.
Hopefully, we won't mention cloud again.
Well, we're on Tech Choices next week, so hopefully it won't just be about the cloud. We can talk about some of the other bits that we do. Obviously, we've gone from the architecture through to the cloud. Now it's really knuckling into some of the more gritty bits and some of the decisions and considerations around the tech that we use. So, again, thank you very much, chaps.
No problem, James. We'll see you soon.
I shall speak to you next week. I think that just about wraps things up here. If you have any thoughts or questions on anything we said today, get in touch, whether that be through our Twitter @RealTSF or email at hello@startupfactory.tech, or feel free to drop in for a coffee and a chat. As ever, thanks for listening.